and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Humm.
I'm Ann Northrop.
And Ricky Nathanson, persecuted for being a trans woman in Zimbabwe, was granted asylum in the United States, and she is our guest today after being honored by Outright Action International last night.
We're very eager to talk to her. Then we will talk about the federal LGBT rights bill, the Equality Act, which advanced in the Democratic U.S. House this week and is headed for passage there, if not the Senate. We'll see.
Trump did unveil his anti-LGBT executive order to allow discrimination in health care against us and others based on religious belief.
And people don't want to impeach him. What's wrong with them? Iowa's governor enacted anti-transgender legislation, but Tennessee's hate slate of bills is on hold till next year.
Brazil's anti-LGBT fascist President Bolsonaro canceled a trip to New York amid protests.
Brunei, they think they're getting away with this. They say that they won't get rid of their death penalty for homosexuality, but that they won't enforce it until, of course, they want to.
Cuba canceled the annual Pride March at the last minute there.
And another big study confirms that adherence to HIV drugs is 100% effective against transmitting the virus.
But our guest is Ricky Nathanson. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Ricky.
From Zimbabwe, a trans activist there, the founder of a group called TREAT, Trans Research, Education, Advocacy, and Training. Now in the United States, after being honored last night by Outright Action International. We have a picture, by the way, of last night. There you are in the red with the
very smart. That's how you go to these things. Stand out
with the cast of Transparent there, and with Beth Brooke Marciniak, I think, who is a corporate leader, and of course Jessica Stern there on the left, who is the head of Outright Action International in the leopard print.
I think Jessica thought she was going to the Met Ball with the camp theme.
It was a great evening, and you told your story of what you went through in Zimbabwe. Why don't you tell the rest of the world here now about what happened to you there?
Great. Thank you for the opportunity. So in 2014, I was at a local hotel in Bulawayo, the city in which I live. And at the same hotel, there was a leading government official who was, he was then, I'm not sure if he still is, but he was the youth league leader for the region of Matabeleland, in which Bulawayo is situated. He had moved to Bulawayo about 2 to 3 months prior, and he had seen me before that, but he didn't actually know that I was trans. I think he thought, he thought I was a woman, which I actually am, but he thought I was a biological woman.
Cisgender.
A cisgender woman, that's correct. Thank you for the correction. And he was extremely drunk that night. He was sitting with another man, and I think he was told that night that I was actually trans and I was not cisgender. So he called me over to speak to him, and I'd met him prior, so I thought, it's just a normal
just wants to say hi. Yeah.
And so what he said to me was, he said, the man he was sitting with didn't like what I was doing. So I said, well, what is it that I'm doing that he doesn't like? He said, oh, no, well, you know what you're doing. I said, no, I don't know what I'm doing. So he said, well, this person is from the president's office, intimidating that he was a Secret Service agent, and that this person, if I didn't give them money, they wanted $20, it was a bribe. If I didn't give them money, they wouldn't allow me to leave the premises, to leave this hotel where I was. So I ignored it and I thought, oh, these are just drunk guys, and I went to go sit down with friends of mine. And within 45 minutes, riot police arrived, and there were 6 of them. complete with visors, rifles, baton sticks. They went across to speak to this young man, and he pointed over to me, and then they came to me and they said, well, you're under arrest. I said, well, what's the charge? They said, well, just come with us. And I was bundled into the back of this, like a police van. Just open back, so I was in the back of this, surrounded by these 6 police officers riding through the city at, it was like 5:45 at night that evening.
All by yourself?
All by myself with these six riot police officers with guns, pointing to me. And at that stage, I was very well known in the city because I ran a modelling agency. I also had, before I transitioned, I worked as a company secretary for Dunlop Zimbabwe, which is like the big time manufacturing company of Zimbabwe. So I was well known. I'd been in the press for my corporate work and my modelling and my events, and so I was well known. That said, I was taken to the Bulawayo Central Police Station, where upon arrival I was charged with criminal nuisance for using a female restroom. And then in between the fiasco of speaking to one police officer and another one, and fingerprints taken and mugshots taken, it was like really chaotic. I was taken to a side office, and in there were 5 police officers, and so they said, looked at me and said, but what are you? Are you a man? Are you a woman? And like ridiculing me, and they were speaking the local language and laughing. And so the one took out a pistol and he said to me, right, show us, what you are. So at gunpoint, I was forced to strip naked. And so with that, the treatment I received, I mean, the ridicule and the lambasting just became that much greater, because
not to mention the threats.
Absolutely.
And they kept you in jail for 3 days.
Yes. So
for this.
Yes. So after all this happened, I was locked away in a cell on my own. But the cell, the conditions in the cell were terrible. There was not a single light, so I couldn't see. It was like completely dark in there. I was given a dirty blanket, and this blanket, when I tried to use it, I was sleeping on a cold floor. There was no bedding in the cell. When I tried to cover myself with the blanket, I could feel like the lice. So I threw this blanket aside. So I was kept under those conditions for 3 days. I was in for 3 days and 2 nights in jail. But throughout the 3 days and 2 nights, every time the police officers would change guard, they would take me out of the cell, parade me in front of these people. They'd laugh at me and spit on me and do all these nasty things, and then put me back in jail. So the third morning, because the law in Zimbabwe states that you cannot keep someone in a holding cell for more than 72 hours. So I had to go to court. I went to court. So this happened the Thursday. The Saturday morning I went to court, and the prosecutor did not know how to handle my case, because she was a young woman, a young cisgender woman. And she'd never in her life come across transgender people, or so she said. And the docket said I was transgender, and because I'd been for gender verification examinations with 2 doctors at 2 public hospitals, and they both said I was transgender. So she didn't know how to handle this whole fiasco, and she decided that I should be placed on remand until the senior area prosecutor came on duty, because she didn't know how to handle the case. So with that, this young man that had me arrested was also at the court, and he was so angry, and he said
at you,
at me and the prosecutor for letting me go, and he said that there was no way I could be allowed to walk the streets of Zimbabwe after what the president says we are, and he said to this woman, he cannot guarantee that I'll be alive much longer if I'm let go.
And in fact, I'm going to jump ahead a little because time.
Yes.
But you were then pursued. People broke into your house.
Yes.
People threatened you.
So fast forward to 2018. So after the So I went to court and then I was acquitted, and then I filed a civil lawsuit against the state for what had happened to me, because they had violated at least 7 of my constitutional rights as the activist that I am. And everything went quiet, and we went to the High Court of Zimbabwe. The case was heard in July 2017. And at the time, the judge indicated that he would be handing down judgment within a month of the case being heard, and nothing happened until August 2018, when sort of like there was when that the judgment was being handed down. At that time, I noticed that a car would follow me around Bulawayo, and then my phone was making strange noises, which when I spoke to somebody, told me that it was bugged. But then I was traveling with the Southern Africa Trans Forum. I was hardly ever in Zimbabwe. So I went away August, September. I got back home in October. And in the space of 2 weeks, my home was broken into twice. The first time, I wasn't home and it was completely trashed. Nothing was taken. So it was, to me, a form of intimidation. The second time, I was home and I was physically assaulted by 4 men.
You were beaten in your bed, and one of them said you are messing with the wrong people.
That's correct. Yeah. So, I mean, what conclusion could I come to other than this had something to do with my case, with my having stood up to the government of Zimbabwe. And then a day or 2 days later, because I was coming to New York for a meeting with Outright Action International. We were looking at some legislation which is going before the United Nations. That was a Tuesday. The Sunday, I bumped into that same man that had me arrested in 2014, and he was so surprised to see that I was still walking around, I'm still alive. And he said, "I wonder, what are you still doing? Why are you still here? Why are you still alive?" And he was shouting at me. So I walked up and I got into my car and I left. Then I came up to New York for that meeting, and then I went to Geneva for Argentina for the W Path conference. I went back to Africa, but I went to South Africa for 2 weeks of meetings. I went home to Bulawayo for one day to literally unpack and repack, and then I came back to New York for the Advocacy Week, beginning of December, with Outright Action International. When I was here, I got a phone call from my finance manager of the organization of Treat that I started, and she said that 3 men had been to the office in an unmarked white car, and indicating that they were government agents. They were looking for me. They wanted my itinerary, and they said that when I returned back home, I was wanted for questioning by the president's office. When I heard that, I decided no, I couldn't. Having been through what I'd been through in October, 2 months prior, I didn't think it would be wise for me to go back home and still be alive to speak to you today.
And when you talk about the president, I mean, you had Robert Mugabe all those years, who described gay people in general as worse than dogs. We
and
had
pigs.
Their picture of Mugabe there.
Yes.
And then the new president, Mnangagwa, actually. His party reached out during the transition or before the election to try to get LGBT people to vote, but things have not gotten better.
Yeah, so what happened was they reached out to an organization called GALS, the Gays and Lesbians of Zimbabwe, who are based in Harare. And I think the person who reached out to them was he was a party official, and he had a meeting with the director of GALS, and wanted to know what was GALS's feeling on the elections, and how would they vote, and and they basically said that they needed the vote, they needed our vote. After that happened, GALS. They organized a press conference of all the leaders of the LGBT organizations in Zimbabwe. So there were 10 of us,
including you,
including myself. So there were 10 of us that attended this press conference. It's online actually, and my statements are online at what I said, and we basically voiced our skepticism at how genuine we felt.
I would think so.
We felt that the ruling party had been at reaching out to us.
Yeah.
And then also I had my own concerns. For example, there was a young trans woman from our city who, when she tried to go and register to vote, was treated horrendously at the election registration station. So we had this conversation with among ourselves, and we gave a statement to the press where we said that we highlighted that in the past the ruling party or the government had been known to use the LGBT as scapegoats when they were campaigning, because we were always those mentioned
happens here
as
too.
pigs and dogs. Yeah. So we had this conversation with the press of Zimbabwe, and there were the independent newspapers and there were also the government newspapers that were there. So the independent, we have independent press, and we have the state press. Mm-hmm. So they were there as well. So that's what happened at that at that juncture.
So you didn't go back when you realized that you really were in terrible danger.
Yes.
You stayed here, and really shockingly, the United States government has granted you asylum.
Yes, they have.
This is probably because you didn't come from Central America.
Yes, I think that could be it. And also, I couldn't believe it myself. So I arrived in the United States on November 28th. Pardon me, and then I filed for asylum by December 27th. And was granted by February 15th. So it was exactly 6 weeks from the date of filing to date of being granted. But I think it also may have something to do with the strength of my case.
Well, sure.
A lot of documentation in the press.
There's a lot of it is online.
You're a prominent person in Zimbabwe.
Yes, and I was also very prominent in the United States.
Yes, exactly.
In the activist circle.
But we see people all the time, I think in particular of a trans woman from Honduras who came here, was held in custody, was not granted asylum, was sent back and was killed.
Yes, I know, and that's a very sad story.
Yeah.
And we see the Trump administration at the UN and any kind of an international agreement, they want to get transgender, anything to do with gender even, out of there.
They don't want to have anything to do with human rights.
Yes.
So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And you're now, tell us, you're working at Casa Ruby in Washington, which is a great local organization.
You are the director of HIV/AIDS prevention and outreach there.
That's correct. So I have known Ruby Corrado, that's the name of the director, for many years. I first met Ruby in 2012 when I came to attend the International AIDS Conference in Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. I stayed on holiday, on vacation for about 4 weeks after the conference. And I stayed with a friend of mine who I'm staying with now in my transitional period. So when I was here in 2012, I reached out to Ruby, and I went to go and see her at an organization, and we became friends ever since then. We've kept in touch. I've seen her on the circuit, so to speak. So we have all these.
We're familiar with the circuit.
Yeah. So I've seen her on the circuit. So when she read on Facebook that I was in Washington D.C., she reached out to me. We had dinner, and I was offered a job. So I'm working at Casa Ruby as the HIV prevention and outreach director.
A happy ending to a very grim story.
Yes, it is a happy ending, and last night, for example, when I made the one comment and I said how bad the Zimbabwe government was in its lack of human rights and its impunity for laws and its fiscal mismanagement and all these things. One of the people in the audience shouted, "Oh, but so is the United States." But I haven't seen that side personally.
Come back in a year and tell us what you think.
I haven't seen that personally as an individual. I certainly have at Casa Ruby. So Casa Ruby is an organization that runs. It has 3 drop-in centers and shelters in Washington, D.C. So we have the big one where I am, it's the headquarters, and we have Casa Ruby 2 and 3. And at these 3 centers, we house between 50 and 70 people.
That's a lot.
Per day,
That's great.
We feed them and we house them. We also provide immigration services. We sort of social security. The HIV program, which I manage, looks at how do we address the scourge of HIV as it affects young LGBTQ people, and mainly immigrants.
Yes, and they are
and homeless
at
people.
Particularly highest risk.
That's
well,
correct.
we could talk for about 6 more days, but we have run out of time.
Yeah.
So, your story is just amazing, and we're really happy that you have landed where you've landed. And Casa Ruby is growing like crazy. I remember when it was started.
It is, yeah. So one of the plans is, and I'm not sure if I can say this, I'm sure I can say this on camera. So one of the plans is Casa Ruby wants to export the model of what it actually does. So Ruby identified me to run what's known as the Institute, and part of the Institute is this HIV program. So what I will do, what the vision is that I will take the Casa Ruby model to internationally, with my international experience in Europe and Africa.
Don't go back to Zimbabwe.
No. I can't go back for 5 years anyway, so no, there's no chance of that
But
happening.
come back here anytime. We'd
Thank you
like to
so
hear more
much.
about it.
And
Thank
we
you,
will tell
Ricky.
we will tell our viewers about it in our email. If they sign up
Yes.
for our email, we'll tell them more about your group.
Great.
Thank you
Okay.
very much for
Thank
being
you very
with
much.
us.
Thank you for
Ricky.
having me.
Our
Thank you.
pleasure. Thank
And
you.
congratulations on
Yes.
your Sousa Award.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Well, that was quite a story.
It is. I I really hope she doesn't go back to Zimbabwe anytime soon, but man, what a great activist.
And in terms of asylum claims and from people from Central America, we have something positive to report, that 10 transgender people from Honduras who were released from a detention center in the United States in Texas. They were part of the 80-member LGBT group that was moving as part of the caravan.
Yeah.
30 trans women presented themselves at the border in Tijuana. They experienced discrimination in the caravan, and there were 20 remaining for court dates. Immigration judges...
Well, some have been refused already, but 20 either waiting or refused. They were abused at home, they were abused in the caravan, and they were abused in detention in the U.S.
Yes, and immigration judges have only approved 35% of asylum pleas in 2018, a record low, and that's obviously the anti-immigrant policy of the administration.
Well,
right.
the administration there, let's go. There's a little segue to the administration. I am particularly appalled this week by what the State Department did. We told you a little while ago about 2 married gay men, one from the U.S., one from Israel. They were married abroad, but they are married, legally married, U.S. married people. They had twin boys born of a surrogate, using each of their sperm. So one test.
One's American, one's Israeli.
According to the U.S. State Department, that is not.
No.
In
I
fact,
mean the
husbands,
men.
yes.
Yes.
But the State Department only wants to give citizenship
It's
to the
disgusting.
child born of the U.S. Husband's sperm. In fact, we haven't tested the other twin, and this is disgusting. A court has already said that they are both parents, and the kids are both entitled to U.S. citizenship, and the State Department is now appealing that ruling and saying, no, we do not want to give citizenship to the other twin. We do not want to recognize this marriage. We do not want to give it usual marriage rights with parentage. It's just unbelievable.
1 million species are on the verge of extinction, and this is the kind of trouble that you want to make for those of us who are left. I mean, and we have climate change now. I mean, just this week in Trump outrages, the conscience rule was issued, and it basically allows medical providers to discriminate on their beliefs, especially against LGBTQ people, but also against minority religions.
And not just on their religious beliefs, also on their moral beliefs. You've got a wide range there of outs for treating people equally.
You want to talk about morality?
This comes out of the Health and Human Services Office for Civil Rights.
Which is run by an anti-gay bigot. I mean, the Trump issued another pardon this week for a former Army lieutenant who had served 5 years for murdering an Iraqi prisoner in 2008. Shot him dead and then claimed self-defense.
Took him out in the desert and shot him dead and claimed self-defense.
No, I mean, everybody's been seeing the spectacle of them defying all subpoenas from the administration, the total breakdown of separation of powers.
Or law.
Nice to see 600 former federal prosecutors signing a letter saying there's a lot of obstruction of justice in that. And nice to see Lawrence Tribe, who wrote a book cautioning about impeachment. That's what the book was about, saying no more time for caution. Caution is cowardice at this point. Caution is and cowardice becomes betrayal of the Constitution.
Well, whether it's taking them out legally or taking them out by a vote, I just cannot wait for the end of this administration.
Well, we still have federal judges at the lower level in Oregon, Washington, and California who have struck down Trump's attack on Planned Parenthood and the anti-abortion gag rule, so that's positive.
All right. Well, in a little better news, temporarily, in the House of Representatives Judiciary Committee, when they are not trying to cross-examine these people, they managed to pass the Equality Act by a vote of 22-10.
All the Republicans voted against it.
I'm shocked that they only have 10 Republicans on the committee.
Yeah. There are 240 co-sponsors of the bill. It includes 3 Republicans. 218 votes are needed for passage, so it's going to pass. Now, they say the Republicans could try to thwart it through a motion to recommit, forcing a vote on an amendment that the majority would not otherwise allow to come up. That could stall it.
Well, we've seen how they're stalling. They're stalling everything. They stalled this initial passage of the bill in the committee. Representative Sensenbrenner, Republican of Wisconsin, forced a full reading of the bill, 27 pages. It took 30 minutes to read, but evidently the clerk was a hero. She just, boom, went right through it.
They really hate us.
But
the American people
we really hate them.
A Quinnipiac poll, they asked the question, should employers not be able to fire someone because of sexual orientation or sexual identity? 92% said they should not be able to fire them. 92%. You don't get 92% for anything.
And yet they persist.
Well, they're certainly persisting in Texas, where 23 anti-LGBT bills are pending.
But they also got some discussion of a couple of pro-LGBT bills, too.
They had a hearing.
And meanwhile, in Tennessee, the slate of hate, as we call it, of bills proposed there, has been deferred to next year, mostly because businesses, those corporations we like to talk about, and celebrities and, sports teams objected to the bills and said, really, you are going to become the state of hate if you pass the slate of hate.
Do you think they want to pass it during an election year to boost their chances?
Well, we'll see. They did pass one of the bills that says no indecent exposure in bathrooms or locker rooms.
It's an anti-trans bill.
Yes, it is.
And Iowa, Governor Kim Reynolds there, Republican, signed into law 2 bills. One, exempting Medicaid from covering transgender medical procedures. And this is in a state that has transgender protections in the civil rights law. So they actually had to amend the civil rights law to do this, essentially.
Relentless and shameless.
And the other one is about banishing Planned Parenthood from being involved in sex education in public schools.
And then, of course, we have the lovely new abortion bill in Georgia, where you can't have an abortion after you're 6 weeks pregnant, and many, many, many people do not know that they are pregnant at 6 weeks. In the presidential politics area, one development this last week is that Mayor Pete Buttigieg and his husband Chasten ended up on the cover of Time magazine.
American Gothic.
Now, it's Sports Illustrated that's a curse, so I think you're okay if you're on the cover of Time.
Pete was speaking in Dallas, and he was interrupted 4 times by protesters shouting, "Repent! And marriage is between a man and a woman." And he responded, "The moment I packed my bags for Afghanistan to defend that man's freedom of speech," but Beto O'Rourke defended him against this, trying to defend the honor of Texas, which is tough to defend.
You know who's yelling at him? Randall Terry.
Oh, really?
This is Randall Terry running around the country after Pete Buttigieg.
I was a little wary when I heard Pete, when he said he was doing a shooting in Afghanistan, that he wrapped himself literally in an American flag. But
there are a lot of reasons to have qualms, but, as we say, anybody but Trump. All right. And then there's Representative Brian Sims, state rep in Pennsylvania, first out gay rep. He's in trouble for yelling at anti-abortion activists.
He took film of them and he said, "Who is this woman? Identify her. I'd like to go to her house and demonstrate against her because what they're doing to these women trying to exercise their freedom rights."
Well,
I don't
terrible.
think that's a terrible thing.
That has been going on for decades.
No, I mean, I don't think it's terrible that he's saying, "You want to demonstrate against us? We'll demonstrate against you at your homes."
Well, he got a lot of pushback for it because his...
Well, he offered $100 for anybody identifying
his
her.
manner of speaking also was a little rough. So he ended up apologizing.
Oh, okay. Well, okay.
But they were also, they held that big anti-abortion rally in Times Square last weekend, and they had 3 stages. They were broadcasting an anti-abortion film on the jumbotrons in Times Square. They've got a lot of money. A lot of money.
We do.
And this film, Unplanned, is being shown in sort of private bookings in thousands of theaters around the country.
It's a dramatic film dramatizing somebody who turned against abortion who had worked in a hospital or something.
And abortion rights are really under fire and are in a lot of trouble.
They are indeed. Yeah. Arizona, now we told you about how they had a law that you can't talk about gay stuff in schools, and there was a lawsuit about it. And that made the government back off and change the law.
Yes.
But we wanted to show you a picture of 13-year-old Santi Ceballos, a 7th grader who was the plaintiff in the National Center for Lesbian Rights suit about this.
Non-binary, trans, 13-year-old.
Constantly bullied in school, segregated from peers during sex education, and an extremely brave young person.
Thank you, Santi.
Okay. Good news from Ohio, where the congressional map was declared unconstitutional.
Yay.
That gave the Republicans a 12-4 advantage. But the Supreme Court of the United States, that's one of the big decisions that we are awaiting this year.
Bad news from California, where a couple of gay men in West Hollywood dropped dead instantly from, it is believed, fentanyl-laced meth or cocaine.
Wow.
And they're saying that this is widely out there, and people really, it's out there to such an extent that the LA LGBT Center has a supply of like 5,000 fentanyl testing strips. So if you're using these drugs, you really ought to be testing them before you use them, because this stuff will kill you right away.
Wow.
There is no coming back from this.
Wow.
So that is a warning.
Is anybody being charged with murder for selling it?
I don't know.
In Denver, a trans woman, Amber Nicole, was severely beaten outside a bar there in the morning, and face and jaw broken, nerve damage, and the police are investigating, but terrible.
The lieutenant governor of Guam was in New York for the conference of the International Gay and Lesbian Travel Association to invite LGBT visitors to Guam, pointing out that it was a friendly spot and he wants everybody to come there to vacation.
Well, and tell us about the lesbian EMS chief.
Lillian Bonsignore is the first woman and first out LGBT person to run a major service in New York. She is the new head of the fire department's EMS service, with 4,500 EMS workers working under her. She is terrific, and congratulations to Lillian on her promotion. Everybody's very, very happy about it.
Now, you probably think of New York, and especially Manhattan, where we live, as a fairly liberal place. But the deputy borough president under our friend Gail Brewer, the borough president, is Matthew Washington, who constantly tweets support for anti-LGBT and anti-choice preachers.
I was shocked by this.
Identified himself as the deputy borough president on his feed, now says, oh, I'll take that down. These are just my private views. Promotes focus on the family.
Yeah, and that abortion rally in Times Square.
And Gail just says, well, those aren't my views. But I tell you, I'm a little nervous with someone of this,
It's a conundrum. It's a conundrum. You've got someone in a public job, and they express these views. What are your...
Well, public employees do have a great deal of protection, but for their certainly certain jobs. But when you're out there representing things, I mean, how can we trust you to do the right thing for LGBT people and women and others if this is what you're harboring?
Well, and the other side would say, how can we trust you to do the right thing for our people?
Because if you check our feeds, we're for justice for all. That's
But they don't agree that we're for justice for all. They think we're killing babies. And promoting perversion.
And thus the Civil War in the United States.
Honest to God.
On the other hand, we won a battle this week, of sorts. We told you about how Brazil's anti-LGBT fascist president, Bolsonaro, was going to be honored in New York with Mike Pompeo at a dinner that was going to be at the Marriott Marquis, where Tootsie is playing on the 14th of May. And
maybe that's why he's canceled.
And he is not going to come. It sounds like the dinner is still going forward, the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce gala. So maybe we still have to protest. Well, certainly Pompeo is there.
Well, and how hard is it to beam him in from Brazil? He could easily be on a live feed from there.
And Citibank is still a sponsor of this. Some corporations dropped out.
Yeah,
but
here's the list. Delta, Bain Capital, Mitt Romney's old company.
These are the good guys.
And the Financial Times withdrew their sponsorship of this dinner, but Citigroup, J.P. Morgan, Morgan Stanley, the Bank of America, and United Health Group have continued their sponsorship.
What about Chase, our bank? I have them on the bad list.
I don't have them on any list, so I don't know.
Okay.
But I hope to be proved wrong, but the fact that he's not coming to New York doesn't mean anything to me if he's still being live streamed.
And Pompeo is worth protesting, who said, let the Arctic ice caps melt, we'll have new trade routes.
Yeah.
Staying in New York for a second, in Brooklyn, some sad news. Former city council member Lou Fiddler has died at 62 years old.
Yeah.
I knew him very well. He was chair of the Youth Services Committee, devoted himself totally to the cause of homeless youth, particularly LGBTQ youth, who he said made up 40% of that population. His advocacy was used against him. This was a South Brooklyn district, a very conservative district, and it didn't faze him one bit.
He was a hero.
He was.
Straight guy, great ally.
Yeah.
I don't know if this belongs here or in entertainment news, but Scrabble has approved the use of some new words: genderqueer, cisgender, transphobic, ZE. But here's my question. You only get, 7 letters on a Scrabble thing? How are you going to spell transphobic with 7 letters? Or genderqueer? I guess you would add letters.
If somebody did phobic, you could do transphobic, and you could get extra points.
Yes, or gender, and you could add queer. But really,
That's true. A couple of other losses I want to mention. A guy named Tim Fisher out in St. Paul, Minnesota, straight ally in Lutherans Concerned, has died at 54. He felt a duty to stand by gay and lesbian friends hurt and humiliated by the church, and he encouraged congregations to be reconciling in Christ. That's the phrase they use for gay people. And then Rachel Held Evans, a Christian writer who challenged the evangelical establishment, has died at the age of 37. After a severe reaction to antibiotics, she advanced full inclusion of LGBT people in churches, and she had to leave the evangelical church, even though she was a big believer, because she said she was exhausted by the culture wars, as are we all.
Well, you've always said, don't waste your time with people who are not going to change their minds.
That's a quote from Bayard Rustin. Don't waste your time with the 10% of people who will never agree with you, because now it's 40%.
Yes, it is. Or at least 35. It varies. All right. International news?
Yes, please.
All right. Well, Cuba The government has just canceled their annual Pride Parade. It's the 12th or 13th annual parade. Now, this is the thing known as Mariela's March, run by Mariela Castro.
Cuban conga against homophobia and transphobia is the name of it.
This has always been controversial because Mariela, daughter of Raul, niece of Fidel, runs an organization called Senesex and has been pro-LGBT for many years, but the independent LGBT activists have always said this was simply window dressing for a repressive regime that was still being mean to dissidents and activists and particularly LGBT. So she canceled this march this year, and now the independent activists are saying, yeah, see, and she's really, the government's being influenced by the evangelical church,
yes,
which are the ones that got marriage equality
yes,
taken out of the new Constitution.
I mean, we used to be oppressed by them when they were godless communists, and now they're communists who are promoting the religious right.
Yes.
Down there. And they're the ones who, put the kibosh on marriage.
Well, they do, some things in Cuba are very progressive and wonderful.
Yes,
and
medical care.
Education.
Yes.
But then there's a lot of human rights violations.
Right.
So, and they're also reacting to some extent to the fact that Trump is reimposing a lot of sanctions against Cuba. And
hurting them economically.
Yes, and that's a bad thing.
Well, Brunei, we've been telling you about
So
Brunei.
the independent activists
yes,
in Cuba may do their own march this weekend. We will let you know if anything happens.
We've been telling you about Brunei and their law that they've instituted where you can be stoned to death for being gay or even for adultery, I think. So the Sultan declared a moratorium on the death penalty, but the law remains on the books, so...
And you can still whip lesbians.
Oh.
In bad ways.
Terrible. Well, they do have the death penalty for homosexuality in Saudi Arabia, and they had you all read about this mass execution. 37 people were killed. 5 were linked to homosexual acts. Most of the people executed, they said it was terror related. That just meant they were part of a religious minority. But one of these kids, one of them was 16 at the time of arrest. One of them was crucified. One was allegedly confessed to sex with 4 others and executed, beheaded.
Our good friends, Saudi Arabia. And Brunei, that's more lip service. If they want, when the pressure dies down, they'll go right back to doing whatever they want to do.
Yeah, we're still not staying at your hotel, Sultan.
Yeah, this is all just an attempt to get out from under the economic pressure.
Russia.
Russia. Well, in Chechnya, they put out a new report analyzing the arrests of gay men and found new waves of that and new beatings and torture and humiliation.
I read this whole story of what they did to these 4 guys in the latest wave, and it is unbelievably vicious. And it's all about, you're going to tell us the names of others, or we're going to get you. Now, you can go to HRW, Human Rights Watch. What does that say?
.org.
Does that say HRC? Does it say?
It should be HRW.
HRW.org. HRW.org. That's Human Rights Watch. I will put the link in our email to the...
Take down that Chiron, please.
Take down that Chiron.
There
it is. It's corrected.
Fixed it. Thank
All right.
you.
Anyway, but I mean, it's just unbelievable. And the investigation of the last wave, which was intense, produced absolutely nothing.
All right. On a few lighter notes, in the United Kingdom, they have a television show called Blind Date. They set people up and they send them on some trip. Well, they set up a couple of men, gay men, for a date, and they sent them to...
2 bisexual men they put together.
2 bisexual, thank you. And they sent them on a date to the lovely Caribbean island of St. Lucia.
Where you could get 10 years in prison for homosexuality. And they said they were
warned.
They were tense throughout the whole trip. But the good side is it has drawn attention to the anti-LGBT laws there, and tourism was already down because of this.
The producers of Blind Date have apologized. As well they should.
What will Ireland do with the virulently anti-LGBT pastor Stephen Anderson? This is a guy who applauded the Pulse massacre. He is barred from many countries in the West, including most in Europe who are under this, 26 of them, but Ireland is not part of this group. He's due in Ireland on May 26th, so there's a campaign to block him.
Wow. He's been barred from African countries too, I think. Well, staying with the UK, in Scotland, they are putting together the 2021 census, and they've decided to add voluntary questions on sexual orientation and gender identity because they want to gather evidence to provide support and protection for Scotland's transgender population. Now, this is something we've talked about in this country a lot too. Should we put questions like that on the census or shouldn't we? Would it drive people away? Would people answer it? Would they trust the government with that information? Would the government somehow manipulate that information? Scotland seems to be a better place to ask those questions.
They say if Scotland does separate from Britain, it will become the richest per capita country in the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've always liked Scotland. In Poland, in Warsaw, a female activist put up a poster and wheat pasted it around town in Warsaw. The
Black Madonna.
Yeah, classic picture with a halo around the Madonna and the baby Jesus. And this activist painted a rainbow flag in the halo portions.
Looks very pretty.
It does look pretty, and it has caused quite a controversy.
Not since
in
Rudy
Warsaw.
Giuliani tried to take funding from the Brooklyn Museum for using a piece of dung on a painting of the Madonna.
Dried elephant dung.
Yes.
Which also was a very beautiful painting. Wow,
Yes,
was that gorgeous.
I went to the protest against Giuliani there.
The activist who did this was detained, questioned for 5 hours, and if she is prosecuted, she could face 2 years in prison for offending religious belief.
Well, when we go down that road, you're...
Exactly, but this has provoked protest by hundreds of people in Warsaw. There's a lot of controversy these days in Poland over LGBT rights. It's become a real hotbed of
the right wing uses it against us, and we use it for it.
And we fight back.
In AIDS news.
Yes.
A big European study of 1,000 gay male couples, where one is HIV positive, the other is not, who have sex without condoms. And if the one who's HIV positive is adherent to drugs, there are no cases of HIV transmission among any of them. It really puts this issue to bed. If you are adherent, you are not going to transmit HIV.
But you really have to be adherent, and you have to be tested to find out if you are, in fact, undetectable in your virus level, because that is what is the point at which you are not transmissible.
A few of the guys in this study did get infected, but they were fooling around outside, and they could tell from the strain of the virus that happens. 7 of them, out of the 1,000. Yeah, well, that's going to happen.
And we'd just like to inform you that May is National Masturbation Month.
No, I had no idea.
Celebrate as you will.
Okay.
All right.
May. Yes, you may. In New York, they've adopted new eligibility requirements for ADAP. No more asset test. Annual income level is now up to 500% of the federal poverty level.
This is the AIDS Drug Assistance Program, where if you need help paying for your drugs, the state government will pay.
So if you're single and you make up to $62,450 a year, you're eligible, and the program is now called Uninsured Care Programs. And Canada is reducing the time a gay man has to wait after sexual relations to give blood from 15 months to 3 months.
Oh, well, that's better. But one reason the ADAP program has to expand its eligibility is because of the prices of these drugs, which are often outrageous.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to entertainment news.
How did you enjoy the Met Gala this year?
Well...
This is at the Metropolitan Museum.
I didn't attend.
Well, the exhibit there, the fashion exhibit, is called Camp, Notes on Fashion, after Susan Sontag's Notes on Camp. And so everybody got dressed up and tried to be campy, including Billy Porter. There's Billy Porter from Pose.
In kinky boots, in wings and gold and just sparkling all over.
And then Janelle Monáe.
Now that is spectacular.
Is it camp?
Well, that's the question. That's a Christian Siriano creation with several hats on her head and blinking eyes. She had a little purse that was the other eye. Quite stunning, whatever it is. But as I look through hundreds of pictures of these people.
And we are going to send you a link to hundreds of pictures. And if you sign up for our email, we'll give you the link.
It's all on HuffPost.com, and the New York Times website has them too, and probably everyone else. It's quite a collection of outfits. It's quite a range. But as I looked through it, I thought, what is camp outfits? I can look at something. I can say Dynasty in its original iteration was campy. But to try to figure out what to wear that is camp, I think is a tougher question.
Susan Sontag said, camp is love of the unnatural, of artifice and exaggeration.
Well, there was plenty of that at the Met Ball. And then, of course, someone said, all this money spent on this, and where are the proceeds going? To the Met Costume Institute. Right. It'd be nice if it went to, some homeless youth or something.
Exactly.
Yeah, but
right.
Nonetheless.
Well, certainly a lot of those people do a lot
they do.
For LGBT charities.
And I could just look at Janelle Monáe all day anyway.
Okay.
But it was quite spectacular. Really, it was more spectacular, I think, than any of the ones they had before because it called for some outrageous creativity.
Okay, I have broken down and started to watch Gentleman Jack on HBO about Anne Lister, a lesbian who...
landowner in the 19th century. It's
1830s, England.
It's a true story. It's based on her diaries. She was... Talk about camp. She was just Casanova.
That's Saran Jones and Sophie Rundle as the love interest.
It is amazing.
She takes charge of her estate.
You're lucky to have found it.
I am. But we're so busy putting this show
and
together.
you haven't seen the third episode, which is the best yet.
Don't tell me I'm going to watch it tonight on demand.
That's all I'm going to tell you.
It really, I mean, she, some of the women that she's in love with, you can't take it. They can't take living this way in the 1830s.
Of course.
And they rebel and they marry men. But this was created by Sally Wainwright, and I think it's pretty terrific.
The two most exciting, sexy lesbian shows on TV now, Gentleman Jack on HBO, Killing Eve on BBC America or AMC. It's running simultaneously on both. They are both so funny, so sexy. They're really great.
We're going to get Patience and Sarah back as an opera. They're going to do it at the Hunter Opera Theater May 9th and 10th. That's coming up right this weekend.
Yes.
We're going to give you the link in our email, but it's the Hunter Opera Theater, Hunter College Opera Theater.
Well, they're doing it at the K Playhouse at Hunter. And Patience and Sarah is also a true story. It's based on the Isabel Miller novel, but that was done on a true story of 19th century, I think, U.S., upstate New York, two women in love. And I've been following this opera for some years, since it was first created some years ago. And it's really terrific. If you're possibly interested, I'd really recommend it.
Well, speaking of opera, the New York City Opera is going to premiere the Stonewall Opera, written by Ian Bell and Mark Campbell, June 21st to 28th. But they're previewing it in Bryant Park on June 12th at 6 o'clock. That's right behind the library.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Stonewall the Opera.
And I have sad news to report. The gay guy on American Idol got cut.
No.
Jeremiah gone. He was in the top 6. They eliminated 2. They saved 1, not him. So he's gone.
Avenue Q is going to be gone after 15 years on Broadway and off Broadway continuously. It's now at the New World Stages, but they're closing it on May 26th.
They held the Billboard Music Awards in the last week or so, and one of the winners for Top Rock Artist, well, this was controversial in itself, that Imagine Dragons won, but nonetheless, their leader, Dan Reynolds, gave an acceptance speech that was all about blasting conversion therapy. Their from Utah, Mormon, and he has been on quite a crusade for some years now.
And he spoke explicitly about how conversion therapy leads to LGBT suicides and depression, and that our kids have triple the rate of suicide, and only 34 states don't have any law against it. So.
And the GLAAD Media Awards were held last weekend, but they will be aired on Logo this Sunday night, a condensed version, I guess. Madonna spoke, so if you're interested in that, on Logo Sunday night, the GLAAD Media Awards.
And there's the first Latinx LGBTQI Arts Festival in New York City called Fuerza Fest, May 8th through the 19th. You can go to Fuerza, F-U-E-R-Z-A, fest.org, and we'll provide that link in our email as well.
Now, what's this Terrence McNally thing on PBS on June 14th?
Yeah, it's called Terrence McNally, Every Act of Life. It is a part of the American Masters series.
Is it a biography?
Oh, yeah, it's a documentary about him.
Yeah.
Terrence McNally has, he's 80 now, anyway.
Really? I saw him at a panel discussion a few weeks ago. He looked like he was about 40.
Well, maybe Tom Curtihy, his producer husband, is keeping him young.
Yeah.
Because his work has been produced on Broadway 25 times. And a revival of Frankie and Johnny and the Clair de Lune is in previews now with Audra McDonald and Michael Shannon.
I took my youngest brother to see the Ritz when decades ago.
About a bathhouse.
Yes.
On Broadway, right?
Yes, I think I was fairly newly out and a little enthusiastic about my new life, and I wanted to share it, and I think he was a little taken aback.
Oh, it was a very light comedy.
It was.
With gangsters and everything.
Yeah,
but
it was.
I remember years ago, I don't know if this is going to get into the documentary, but they asked Terrence, why did you get into theater? He said, to meet guys. That's what got him started.
That's such a common story.
By the way, did we mention the trans opera singer baritone Lucia Lucas?
Yes, a long time ago.
We did.
Yeah.
All right.
And country singer Cameron Hawthorne has come out in a new video. He did a video called Dancing in the Living Room, and it shows different, it's a nice country song. It shows different couples together, a two women couple, an older straight couple, and you work your way through this song, and at the end, he goes and meets up with his male partner and dances.
Dancing in the living room or something, right?
Yeah, as I just said, dancing in the living room.
No, I mean, that's the title of the whole thing.
Yes. Right. But it's kind of charming, and you can find that on YouTube, Dancing in the Living Room. But
you can't find the photos of Jerry Falwell Jr., who's the head of Liberty University, the horrible guy, anti-gay, big Trump supporter. He used Michael Cohen as a fixer to get these photos that they're not telling us what's in them, but they're embarrassing photos of a sexual nature.
Something to do with a pool boy.
A pool boy who they paid $1.8 million to start a business. It's all very murky. But apparently the photos were destroyed. I wish the pool boy would come forward and give us a little description.
Maybe this is part of what Michael Cohen meant when he said there's more to tell.
Well, Michael saw the photos and he said, yeah, they're terrible.
Well, that is a great tease at the end of the show. We will be back, actually.
I'll be back with Rob Schutter next week.
That's right. Thank you, Rob, for filling in. I'll be back eventually. Don't worry. Bye.
Bye.